Welcome back to the Rad Lab Podcast. Today we have a special guest, Dr. Amanda Carroll, our Tennessee Tech own. She has won numerous awards. She has won faculty advising awards here at TTU, outstanding service awards, as well as a QEP teaching award. So she is well decorated. She has plenty to talk about. So we'll kind of jump right into it. But if you would like to introduce yourself at all, here's your chance.
All right, yeah. So my name is Dr. Amanda Carroll. I'm a senior lecturer in the Department of Chemistry at Tennessee Tech. I just finished my 12th year teaching. I'm also an academic advisor, and I'm really active with the American Chemical Society, both on campus and, throughout their various levels of their organization. So I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for getting on. You've been my most requested.
Really?
Yeah, students want to hear more about you. So.
Really?
Yeah,
That is interesting to know. I would not think that students are asking about me.
I had students, like when, especially during the fall semester, students were definitely like, we want more interviews with other people, and your name came up more than once. So more than a few times.
Thank you. That makes me feel good.
Well, you should. You're making an impact, and based on your awards, you're making a big impact in a lot of students' lives, and we'll get into that.
Yeah.
Some may say you're the best advisor at Tennessee Tech, so think about that. So on this podcast, I always like to start off from the beginning with everyone. So if you would like to give us a little bit of background about where you grew up, and then maybe get into where you found science entering your life and how you ended up enjoying it and want to make it a profession.
Okay, yeah. Well, I do think that I have somewhat of an interesting story, because if you would have told me, even in high school, that I would be doing what I'm doing as a career, I would not have believed you at all. So I'm from Gallatin, Tennessee. I was born and raised there. And I'm a first generation student, so I'm the first person in my family to go to college and get a college degree. And so it's one of those things that I liked school and I really enjoyed it. And so it was kind of a given that I was going to go to college, but I really didn't know what I wanted to do. So I did start out at a community college, because it's helpful to do that if you don't really know what you want to do. You get your gen eds out of the way. Now you get 2 free years of community college, but I had to pay for it. But I got scholarships and grants and stuff, so actually I wasn't paying for it. So I changed my major while I was there a lot. And I stayed there. I got an associate's degree, but it did take me about 3 years, just because I changed my major. So I think when I applied, I was a psychology major, and when I showed up for orientation, I was like, oh, I like school, I like teaching, and so I was thinking about doing secondary education and teaching high school. Which my first semester taking those education classes, I realized that actually I didn't want to teach high school, because some of the other high school students were like not very kind to some of the teachers. Like, I remember I had a really great ecology teacher, and it was his first year teaching. He was also like a football coach, but he was so nice, and he made everything so easy. He was like, he let us know exactly what he wanted, and they were just kind of jerks to him. And so I remember thinking, like, I don't think that that's actually what I want to do. And my best friend had decided to go into like a health field. And so I was like, oh, okay. So I looked into some health field options and found laboratory technology. And because of that, I had to take an introductory chemistry course. It was the first chemistry class I had ever taken. And my best friend had also taken it a year before me. And she was like, it's hard. She's like, if you don't make an A in it, it'll be okay. She's like, but just, it's going to be work. She's like, but it was kind of interesting. I had a good teacher. So I couldn't get the same teacher that she had, but I had a person, his name was Professor Paris Powers, and he was my introductory chemistry teacher. And I loved it. It was just absolutely great. Like, it made sense, and it made me happy, and I liked learning about it. And so I had a friend who had taken that class as kind of like a precursor, because she was going to have to take general chemistry. And she said, take general chemistry with me. She's like, we can be lab partners. And I was like, well, I'm done. I don't have to take any other, chemistry classes. I was like, and she said, well, come on, let's do it. And I was like, you know what? Why not? Because I was going to be able to have Professor Powers again. And so I went in and we took it. And I just, again, I really loved it. Some of it was review and some of it was new. And so I just remember thinking like, oh, this would be really cool to do like as a career. And but at that point I wasn't ready. Like I wasn't ready to make that commitment. And so at that point I was like, I'll do this like laboratory technology program, and then I'll maybe come back and get a chemistry degree. And actually I got accepted into that program. They only accept 12 people per year. I got accepted, and then I was kind of like, actually, maybe no, I don't want to do this. And so I met with Professor Powers, and I was like kind of telling him where I was at. And he was like, look, he said, career-wise, you can do a lot more with a chemistry degree. He said, you have a lot of potential to grow. And I think another very transformative opportunity for me during that process was I was invited to take this practicum class. And it was, so the community college I went to was Volunteer State Community College. And so the practicum was called Volunteer State Volunteers for Science. And so they invited students in chemistry classes to take the practicum, and we would go in like once a week and we would learn demos. And so we would learn how to prep the demos, we would learn how to explain the demos, the science that was going on behind them. And then we would go into middle school classes and we would do the demos and the activities for the students. And that is really what made me want to teach. Like, I developed such a large amount of like confidence in my ability to like speak to people and explain complicated concepts to students and stuff like that. And so between like that conversation with Professor Powers and doing the practicum at the same time, I was like, okay. And so that's when I decided ultimately that I wanted to change my major and I wanted to do chemistry. And then I, also wanted to teach, but I wanted to teach at the college level, because college for me is just really where I kind of became myself and found out who I was and what I cared about and stuff. And so when I finished my associate's degree at Vol State, I transferred to Austin P, and I got my ACS certified degree in chemistry. And I was active in their ACS student chapter, which again was like something, I knew they had one, and when I got there and I learned about it, I just jumped all the way into it. And so that was another thing that made me think I want to, be involved with ACS when I become a faculty member. And so after that, I was trying to think about grad school, and I looked at options, and I was really interested in environmental chemistry. I didn't really have one discipline of chemistry that I was like, this is what I want to do. I liked a little bit of everything. And so I was, especially things with numbers. I liked inorganic chemistry. I liked organic chemistry. And I was like, and so I decided to come to Tennessee Tech, and I got my PhD in the environmental sciences program with a concentration in chemistry. And I graduated from there in 2012. And so at that point, I for sure knew that I wanted to teach, and I decided to stay here for a 1 year, a temporary position to kind of figure out what my next move was. And, that temporary position turned into a permanent position. And now 12 years later, here I am. So.
Yeah, no, awesome. That's an amazing story. And for students out there, if you didn't know, yes, you do get 2 years free of community college in Tennessee. So if you're unsure, that is an acceptable and great way to get into college and see what you like and not have to have any financial burden on you or your family. So it's one of the great things Tennessee does for students and for graduating high school students. So take advantage. If you're not sure, take advantage of it, and it can lead to amazing things, and you'll end up saving money in the long run. Oh, yeah.
Well, and I'm really convinced. I don't know if I would have wound up in chemistry if I would have just gone to a 4-year university and jumped straight into a chemistry class, because the class sizes there were smaller. It just was easier to kind of meet people and to get help and answer questions and stuff like that. And so also, when you're in a class of 20, it's a little bit easier for somebody to be a faculty member to be like, hey, you're actually pretty good at this. Have you thought about doing this, for your degree? And so, I owe a lot of where I'm at to Professor Powers. He was, very instrumental, and my organic professor teacher there, Dr. Nealon, was amazing. That's who I tried to get for Gen Chem in the first place, but he's who ran that practicum class. And then I had him for organic, and I struggled in organic, and organic is a challenging class, but also it took a lot of the strengths that I had in Gen Chem away in terms of like the numbers and the equations and things like that. But it also was a class that changed the way that I'd studied. When I studied the way that I had successfully studied for everything else in organic, I did not get the same outcome. And so it's a different way of like preparing for things and thinking about things. And so, I would go to his office and I would be like, I don't understand this. And I'm not going to lie, there were days I left organic chemistry in tears and, but he also would check on me. Like I got a test back and I was like crying, and then I went to calculus right after it and I was just like crying, like very quietly crying in calculus almost the whole class period. But I found out later that he had actually like emailed or called my calculus teacher and was like, is she okay? And he's like, she was really upset. And my calculus teacher, who I had for 2 semesters at that point, was like, yeah, she's fine. Sometimes we just gotta, let it out, and then we'll get over it and move on.
Well, I think a lot of students, when they think about majoring in something, they think they have to get A's or they have to be perfect at it.
Yeah.
And I have a PhD in chemistry, and I don't think I got a single A in a chemistry course when I was in college. I think I was steadily in that B range, but I never got an A.
Yeah.
Not even an A minus. Like we were on the plus minus system,
Okay.
and I never even got an A minus. So, it's, to think that you have to get A's, and I think a lot of kids get hung up on that. Oh, I'm not getting an A in it, I must be bad at it.
Yeah, no, it's not like that at all. And I've heard that. I've heard some of our chemistry majors say that. They're like, well, I'm like not doing great in Gen Chem. And so like obviously like I probably shouldn't be a Gen Chem, I shouldn't be a chemistry major. And it's like, no, that's like you don't have to do well. Like if you do well, that's fine. But Gen Chem caters to a certain like type of skill sets, whereas organic's going to cater to something else, whereas biochem caters to something else. And so the thing about Gen Chem is it's establishing this like foundational knowledge that you're going to build on in all of these other classes, but it's like a mile wide and an inch deep. And so we cover so much stuff that obviously like relates to each other in a lot of ways, but it's really varied. And so it's kind of, trying to like drink out of a fire hose to a certain extent. Versus when you get into those upper division classes, now you can see that like, okay, instead of being a mile wide and an inch deep, like in Gen Chem, it's like, oh, okay, like it's a few inches wide, but now it's a mile deep maybe. And so you start to kind of like really focus in on that knowledge and the skills and stuff like that. And I've seen our chemistry majors, or just people in general, period, come in and make solid C's in Gen Chem, but then they start getting in their upper division classes and they're making A's and B's because it's just, they learn how to study, they learn how to be in college. That's a whole nother part of it. And especially when you come to somewhere like Tennessee Tech, it's rigorous and it's different. And so even if you've had high school chemistry, it's more because this is, a STEM university. And so you shouldn't get discouraged because also, like I said, chemistry is such a broad topic. All of the chemistries are generally not for you. There's going to be some that you like more. There's going to be some that you like less. There's going to be some that are easier for you. And, had I had to base my ability to be a chemist solely on organic chemistry, like that would not be great for me. But it's one of those things. It's like I'm a numbers person. And so, analytical and things like that, I click with a lot better than organic because I don't have good spatial skills. Like my skill set is not very well suited. Now, I have a very healthy appreciation for organic chemistry. It's really awesome. You get to make molecules, but that was not my favorite kind of chemistry, and that's okay. They all don't have to be your favorite for you to be a chemistry major.
Yeah, there's so many flavors of chemistry.
Yes.
And so many things that fall in between and, allows you to do so many different things and, really link all the different types of chemistry that you like, with like environmental and things like that. So, yeah, and just in general, like if you're listening and you're in college and you think you can't do something because you don't get an A in it, it's not... An A is not a determining factor whether you're going to succeed in that path or not.
Yeah.
It's just, a way that it's maybe not the best way, but it's the way that we have to give you some kind of merit-based
Yes.
understanding of what you're learning.
Well, and also realizing that like you're more than that grade, you're more than that number, you're more than that letter. I have seen people make A's in classes, and when you talk to them, you quickly understand that they don't have a good knowledge of that subject. Maybe they were a good test taker, maybe they were able to like cram, but then they didn't retain the information, and so in that case, that good grade doesn't actually mean much, and it's not going to serve them well into the future. But on the other hand, I've had students who will, maybe scrape by with a C in a class, but when you talk to them, you see that they actually do understand it. They second guess themselves, or they talk themselves out of a good answer, or they don't believe in themselves and things like that. But it's like, no, like you do actually do it. So it's really important to kind of separate yourself from it, because it's the grade, because it doesn't define you. It doesn't define who you are as a person. It also doesn't overall like define your success. As long as overall you're doing okay and you have a good GPA and not a 4.0. Like if as a chemistry major, if you can stay in that 3 range, you'll be fine. You'll get a job. You can go to a graduate program if you want to. Like there's a lot of opportunities out there. You don't have to be an A student, because also in terms of like research, a lot of times students who are like, very rigorous, like A students, sometimes that doesn't translate well to research, because when you get into research and there are no right answers now, and they have to face this failure that they've never really had to feel and experience before, you don't know how to handle it.
Yeah.
And so sometimes, having, taken a few hits in some classes or on a test or something, it's character building. You learn resilience from that.
Yeah. No, I think, chemistry will definitely teach you, or science in general will definitely teach you resilience for sure.
I had never made a C until I took PChem, and I was taking like calculus-based PChem. Also, since I did transfer to the community college, from the community college, I had not had physics, but I was an ACS certified major, so I had to take PChem 1 and 2. They only offered PChem 2 every other year, and it just so happened to be the year that I wound up and started at Austin P. And so I had to take PChem before I had ever had a physics class, which I do not recommend. You can do it, but it's not going to be fun. And so I knew that PChem was going to be hard. Like it has that reputation in the field of chemistry. And so I kind of went in and I saw like, oh, you only have to make an 84 to make an A in the class. I was like, oh yeah, we've got this. And then very quickly I was like, oh no, this is like, there's a reason this class has this reputation. And I made a C. I made a C in PChem 1, and that was the first C that I had made. And I thought that I would be upset, but you know what? I was happy for every point that got me that C, and I was like, I will take it and I will run with it.
Yeah, definitely PChem is one of those classes. Either you get it or Now,
I did better in the second semester of PChem, but I think it's because I learned a lot from the first semester, and not even PChem knowledge. I learned like I needed to stop whining as much. I needed to go see my teacher more. I needed to ask questions. I needed to put a different kind of effort into that class. And I got a B. And so I still did not get an A. But it was one of those things that like after I got the grade, I kind of reflected back and I was like, okay, like I could have done better. And so I can do better. I will do better. And so, the next semester I put some better things into place, and it definitely helped the outcome.
Yeah, no, you took PChem way better than I did, because I still don't know anything about PChem, and I got a C in it, but I don't think I deserve that C.
Well, PChem is one of the classes that I talk to our students about, and I'm like, look, I said, the grades in PChem, I said, as long as you're making the effort, like you have to show up to class, you have to do the assignments, you have to study, you have to try. I was like, as long as you're doing that, I said, you can't get too caught up in the numerical grades. I said, because PChem is one of those classes that like, when it all comes together at the end, you're kind of like, I don't know how these numbers translated to this letter grade, but we're going to take it. It's almost always in your favor, and you take it and you run with it, and you don't question the process too much.
Don't question it too much. Don't question it too much.
I was like, there's a little like, magic that happens behind the scenes there.
Because PChemists, they know it's hard, and they know it's hard for most
yeah.
people. So, they try to do what they can
Yeah.
to make it bearable, in my opinion, bearable. But but so you mentioned grad school.
Yep.
And how was that experience? And what do you think was the best thing you got out of it?
So grad school was interesting because, especially like I mentioned earlier, being a first-gen college student, nobody in my family had gone to grad school. I do have some like a little bit further removed family members who had been to college, but like not anybody in my like immediate family or family that I interact with that could have helped and provided that guidance and advice and things like that. So when I got into grad school, it was like totally a whole new, situation, a whole new experience, because now I had nothing. Like before, like I said, my best friend was a year ahead of me in college, and she also, went to the community college. And so I was at least able to get some information from her. And so once I got into grad school, I was just like, I don't even know what's happening. And so I think I kind of initially went into it thinking, this is going to be like undergrad on steroids, and like undergrad was hard, and now this is going to be even harder. But that was not the case. It wasn't like, oh, we're just going to like cram more knowledge at you. A lot of graduate school is like learning how to find knowledge and find information. And here's a problem, and we're going to try to solve it, and maybe you solve it and maybe you don't. But ultimately, like using your resources and, figuring that stuff out. And so I remember my very first week of grad school, really my first semester, I just like super try-harded because I was convinced everybody was going to figure out I was an idiot and they were going to kick me out. And I felt like I was alone in that, but then I realized after the fact that I was not. Everybody was feeling that. And so like I had mentioned earlier, organic is like not my jam. And so one of the very first classes I had to take was organic chemistry in the environment. And I'm like, oh crap. Okay. So I'm 2 years out from any organic knowledge at all. It was not my strong suit at that point. So this class met on Friday, and it was 3 hours, and the professor comes in. And he was very nice, but he had this like he was tall, and he had this deep voice, and he was very energetic. And so it was kind of like a little intimidating at first, although he was very nice. And he started immediately like grilling everybody. He's like, what's your favorite mechanism? And blah, blah, blah. And literally I'm just in here, I'm like, I don't even know. And so I just blurted out the only thing I really remembered well from organic, which is I'm like, the Diels-Alder. And he's like, that's not a mechanism. And I'm like, oh God. And so I just spent the whole class period trying to not cry. And I was like, here it is. I said, this is the first week, and already like I'm out of my depths. And I was very lucky because the EVS program here is relatively small, but I happened to come into it when there was a lot of students in the chemistry concentration. And when I say a lot, I mean between my first year and second year, there were probably like 7 of us. And so one of the other new students who was sitting behind me, she was from Chile, and she turned to me at the end of class, and she's like, oh my God, I almost cried. And I was like, okay, thank God it wasn't just me. And so it was one of those things that it's like, okay, I can do this. Like, I'm just going to work really hard so they don't think I'm an idiot and kick me out of this program. And I did well. He gave us a quiz over organic mechanisms. And if I would have studied for my undergrad organic courses the way that I studied for that, I probably would have made an A in organic, but that's okay because some of it was maturity, some of it was a couple extra years of knowledge and study skills and stuff like that. But yeah, so it was different. It was an interesting experience. And so I guess one of the things I took from grad school is like, you're not alone. Like, I've had other friends who went to grad school after I did, and they're like, everybody else is so happy and they're so well adjusted. And I'm like, look, I said, I'm gonna tell you right now, that's just a brave face that people put on. Because when you move to a new place, and it was the first time I'd lived by myself, and I hadn't made friends yet, and I hadn't like found my research group yet, and so it was one of those things that it's like, oh my gosh. But then it got better. Over time you're kind of like, okay, and then you find your groove, and then all of a sudden you look around and you're like, now new grad students are coming to you, and you're like, I don't even know when I learned all this stuff, but now I know this stuff.
Yeah. No, like, you can't play the comparison game.
No.
Right. That's the quickest way to rob yourself of happiness, right?
Yes. It never serves you to compare yourself to somebody else, because you never know what's actually going on underneath or like behind closed doors. But also, everybody's different, and we have different strengths and different weaknesses. And so it's important that everybody, you know, be their authentic selves and recognize that just because somebody else excels here doesn't mean you have to excel in that same place in that same way, because you're probably doing something a lot better than they were in a different area. So no, if you're in grad school or you're in college or just in life, just you can be so much happier if you don't compare yourself and try to compare success. And everyone has imposter syndrome. Yes.
Like, I know you guys were surprised when you asked me if I had imposter syndrome one time, and I was like, yeah, of course. Like, that's
well, and that's the thing. Like, you come off as like incredibly like confident and, you know, and like sure of yourself, and, you know, but and I think now too, it's kind of weird where I'm at in my life and in my career. In some ways, I'm confident. I'm like, I am a good advisor and I am a good teacher and things like that. But then sometimes I'm still like, oh my gosh, like I could be better, or, you know, I didn't know this or I didn't know that. And so even though I am more confident, I still have imposter syndrome. Sometimes it's like I look around and I'm like, oh, I don't belong here. But the general consensus is if you don't belong there, you wouldn't be there. Mm-hmm. So you wouldn't have made it into the room if you didn't deserve to be there. So give yourself some credit and some grace, and, you know, trust the process and realize everybody else is dealing with the same thing. Yeah. They might not be willing to talk about it as much.
And one of the ways I think I deal with imposter syndrome, or have dealt with it in the past, is like you have imposter syndrome because you care.
Yeah.
Because you care about doing a good job. You care about, you know, being successful. If you didn't have imposter syndrome, you probably don't care as much.
Yeah.
And, you know, so if you have it, it's okay. It's in a lot of ways, it can be a good thing, and you can use that energy and that nervousness towards, you know, positive outcomes.
Oh, yeah.
And so, you know, imposter syndrome in my book is, if you treat it right and don't let it overwhelm you, it's a good thing. It means you care, and that means, you know, you're going to succeed. That's
really the best way to consider it, because I can tell you without a doubt it was that imposter syndrome and being scared of like getting kicked out of grad school because they discovered I was an idiot, you know, which obviously I wasn't, because I got admitted to the program. Like, they knew I wasn't an idiot. But it made me work hard. It made me be like, oh gosh, I got to prove myself. And so, you know, was it always the most productive? No. Sometimes it was a little stressful. But like you said, if you recognize it for what it is and you use it to your benefit to help you do better, and, you know, like, not earn your keep because you know you're already there, but to show that, like, okay, I can thrive in this space.
Yeah, no, I think that's very well put. And imposter syndrome, it gets everybody. I remember, like, you know, I don't like to tell too many stories about myself on these things. I like to interview people, but I had a very similar story with, like, one of my first classes in grad school. It was like a magnetism class. And the whole, like, this is like weeks and weeks go by, and the professor is saying, like, eigenvalue. Like, every other word out of his mouth is eigenvalue. And I never heard that word before. I didn't know what it was, but I'm taking notes and I'm writing eigenvalues down. And I had no idea what it was. And weeks go by of me just, like, thinking I don't know anything. And then I turn around to someone who ends up being, like, one of my best friends in grad school, and I look at him and I'm like, what is an eigenvalue?
Yeah.
And he looks right back at me. He says, I don't know. And I'm like, perfect. And then that set me up for success, because I was like, okay, I'm not the only one in this room who doesn't know what an eigenvalue is. I still don't know exactly what an eigenvalue is, but I was able to be successful out of that.
Yes.
I kind of know what it is now, but, you know, not nearly to the extent.
Not the way probably our P chemists know what an eigenvalue is.
Exactly. So, you know, so don't be afraid. Like, if you don't know something, it's okay. And somebody else in that room definitely doesn't know it as well.
Oh, for sure. Well, and I mean, just you turning around and asking that person and then being like, I also don't know. And it's like me sitting beside this girl that I did not know. I had met her that week. That was it. You know, we we'd had a couple other classes together. And when she's like, oh my God, I almost started crying. I was like, okay, it wasn't just me. Yeah. And it's what I tell my students now too, being on the other side of the experience. I'm like, look, I said, if you have a question, I said, there's probably at least 3 other people that have the exact same question. I was like, somebody has to be brave enough to ask it, and so we are not always going to be like, I have no idea what's going on, because people are like, they don't want to admit that about themselves. You generally don't want to like give away your weaknesses to other people, but there are other people who are like, I don't know what's going on. Y'all just aren't talking to each other about it.
Yeah. Enjoy, like, live in that space, like enjoy that camaraderie around it. Because, then you'll like, oh, we can study together, we can work together, and we can learn it together. And that's always more enjoyable than trying to learn it on your own. So definitely communicate, talk to your fellow students if you're in grad school or in college. Just make sure you're getting out there, and part of college is meeting new people and gaining experience. So
well, and also you have this shared experience, and so nobody else like really knows kind of like what it's like to be a chemistry major other than chemistry majors, and people don't know like what it's like to be in a PhD program until you're in the PhD program with these other people. And the experience is like obviously not the same for everybody, but it definitely is a shared experience. And so, meeting the other people, talking to them, forming those relationships, that is meaningful in so many ways, not only just in that moment, but even afterwards. Like you meet some of your best friends in college, you meet some of your best friends in grad school. And so it's one of those things that, you like, if you're not talking to anybody, you're not going to do that. But also, you got to have people to celebrate with, and you got to have people to commiserate with. You got to be like, I just ran a week-long experiment and it did not work. Or I did something dumb and didn't calibrate my instrument beforehand, and so now I have to do it again. And nobody is going to understand that in the same way than people who have experienced similar things. And so, while you're beating yourself up, they're like, oh, yeah, no, I did it too. Yeah. Man, it sucks. But guess what? We learned a lot from it.
Yeah, misery loves company.
Yeah.
So I like to ask this question to everyone I interview, because I think it gives good answers and gets you thinking about something maybe you didn't think about. So if you had to go back and do grad school all over again, but you could only take one skill with you to do it all over again, what would that skill be?
Oh, this is a good question. So I consider myself to be like a very organized person, but I will say that going through experience like grad school, so I was in grad school for 4 years, it's one of those things that when you start writing your dissertation and you start looking for things, you start looking for files and you start looking for graphs or images, and you're like, I am very organized. And then you're like, I cannot find this. So a good unified organization system that you're consistent with is very good, because your future self will always thank you for that. Because, I saw a meme or something the other day that going through grad school is like doing a group project, but the other members of the group are you from like 4 or 5 years ago, and they like didn't do their work. And so I was like, yes, because even, you're like, I know I have this data. I know I made this graph. I used it on a poster. I can find the poster, but where is the original source file? And so finding a way to come up with some kind of like unified organization method that is going to, be good and consistent for you. And also like learning to consistently like format things. It might take a little bit of time on the front end and be like, I'll do it later. Later you is going to hate you for that. And so if you like find a way to be like, okay, every time I make a graph, this is the font that I'm going to use. This is the color scheme I'm going to use. This is like how I want it to look. Then when you start compiling all of this data and stuff later on and you start putting it together, it saves you so much time, because it's kind of like, oh, I was just using like whatever the default settings in Excel were. And, oh, it changed from this year to this year. And now nothing looks the same. And, and I guess maybe for some people they won't care too much, but like I cared. And there were times I remember thinking, oh yeah, I'll just do this later. And then when later came, I was like, man, this is taking me like 2 or 3 times longer, as if I would have just sat down and spent a few minutes doing it earlier. So it's probably like not the most profound, advice from grad school, but it's something that I think has like also helped me now, because when I put things somewhere, like I generally can find them. I try to, be consistent, because still, even after you get out of grad school, you never know when you might need something. You need to find something. And it's, you can spend a few minutes looking for it, or you can be like, well, also now things are easier too with the cloud, because back in the day I had like flash drives, and I'm like, which flash drive was this on? And, so there are things that make it a little bit easier. But yeah, if you can find some kind of like organization and formatting system that you can just be consistent.
Yeah. No, I think that's great advice. You definitely will save yourself time in the long run. Maybe you would have graduated in 3.5 years.
I don't know about that.
you just save yourself maybe a month or two.
Yeah.
Which is, hey, that's good time.
I remember when Dale and Ed were like, yeah, we think you're ready to graduate. And I was like, what? But I don't know. Also, I feel, looking back, I'm like, oh, I was such a lazy grad student. Like, I could probably go back and do all of my grad work now in 6 months, probably.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
but that's also part of learning and growing.
No, I think if I think every PhD or person who has a doctorate could go back and do their whole PhD in a month to 6 months, like depending on how much data they got. Like I could probably go back and do my entire PhD in probably a month and a half, and like get all the data, get everything out, and maybe writing maybe 2 months because I got to write it. But I could get all the data maybe in a month and a half if I could go back with the same knowledge, and just get it done.
Yeah.
But you also have to think about, you didn't have the knowledge.
Exactly.
You had to learn things. You had to try things.
Yes.
But the amount of work that actually boils down to that gets you your PhD is actually a very small amount of time.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of trial and error
that
fills up the rest of that
time.
And
that's another thing is, now when you go back, you don't have to go through, if you were to redo it, you don't have to go through the trial and error part of it. That didn't work, or this wasn't calibrated correctly, or like I have to learn how to prep and then calibrate this standard and, stuff like that. So there's a lot. And I think we take for granted the knowledge that we get a lot of times and the work that went into obtaining that knowledge. Mm-hmm. So now I can just sit down and do stuff like very easily, and students and other people are like, oh my God, how do you know how to do that? And I'm like, well, I mean, I don't know. I just learned how to do it. But when I first started doing it, it took me a lot longer. Like it was harder. It was, I messed it up, and, you learn from those mistakes, and then you get to where you're at. And then now it's easy to take for granted everything that went into that process.
Yeah, you definitely earn that experience for sure. You definitely earn it. And
also something that one of my undergrad professors said to me that kind of stuck with me was getting a PhD is not about intelligence, because I think a lot of people, especially people who aren't used to dealing with PhDs a lot, it's easy to look at somebody with a PhD and be like, oh my God, well, obviously they're a genius. Like they have a doctorate. That's really not the case. I think, what my professor told me was, it's not about your knowledge, it's about your persistence, and it's about your dedication. And when things go wrong, like sticking with it and getting over it, and being like, okay, like how can I fix this, or like when is it time to maybe abandon something and course correct and stuff like that. And so it's something that I think probably kind of came up and helped me a lot through it, because again, back to the imposter syndrome, it's easy to be like, oh my gosh, like everybody knows so much more than me. And it's like, it's not about that. It's about not giving up.
Yeah, no, it's definitely about gaining wisdom rather than knowledge.
Yeah.
And with that wisdom, obviously, comes knowledge, but it's definitely gaining wisdom.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's we can go on and on about grad school experiences.
Oh, yeah.
But I do want to get into some things that you are involved here at TTU.
Yeah.
Like a very, very successful ACS club here at TTU, thanks to a lot in part because of what you do and all the time you put in to work with the students. And you can just see that in the awards they've won at ACS conferences and things like that. So they've been so successful. And I just want to, can you explain how you've been able to make this club so successful?
Well, so I will say I'm going to give a lot of credit where credit was due. I came into already a very healthy ACS student chapter. So Dan Swartling had been the advisor before me, and they were good. I mean, they did a lot of stuff. They were already very active. He had, developed some good things in terms of like leaders and their succession planning and stuff like that. And they were kind of always consistently getting these commendable, so the ACS award system, there's like a certificate of achievement, and then there's honorable mention, there's commendable, and there's outstanding. And it can be hard for a lot of chapters to break from the commendable into the outstanding. And the way that, for people who aren't familiar, the way that these awards are given is that at the end of every academic year, the students and their advisor work together to put together a report. And so you have to answer these assessment questions, and then you have to put in your events and give information about the events, like, so how many of your like ACS chapter members came, how many faculty came, how many like non chapter people came, what was the audience, descriptions, put in pictures and stuff like that. And so I think that when I got involved, I was able to bring some new ideas and things and build on what was already there. So it's easier to come into something that's already got a good, strong foundation and then help elevate it to the next level. But I think part of it is, how you fill out that report, and sometimes like how you answer the questions, and making sure that you put everything in. Give yourself credit for everything that you've done, because it can be very easy to, at the end of the year be like, oh, I just don't even want to deal with the report and just hurry up and do it. But then after you submit it, you're like, oh, I forgot to do that. So part of it's in record keeping. And so how you like maintain a record of all of those events and the numbers and information that needs to go into the report. But also it's looking at the strengths of what was already there, and then how to take that to the next level. And so one of the things that I think that I helped do, they were looking at getting that Green Chapter Award. And so you have to do at least 3 green chemistry events. And so you have to be careful about these, because they don't want it to be sustainability, they don't want it to be environmental chemistry. It has to specifically be green chemistry. And so I sat down with them and I'm like, look, like, okay, we have to do at least 3 events. Like, let's think about 3 things that we can do. Like, how can we teach it? How can we make sure also it ties to green chemistry? And so I think after I got involved, they got their first green chemistry award. And this was something that, Dr. Swartling also was, very passionate about, but I think it just had like not kind of come to fruition. And so another thing is, I am very active with them. And so, I sit down, I meet with them, I try to make sure that they have all the information that they need, but you also you listen to their ideas, because this is not my club, this is their club. And so I, okay, what do you care about? Because also that changes from year to year. So it's not like, oh, this is what we do because we've always done it. You do have some events that you kind of are like, okay, annually we're always going to do this. We're always going to do that green chemistry lecture, and we're going to plan a week of events for National Chemistry Week, and we're always going to, do our Earth Week activities and stuff like that. But it's kind of taking the temperature of the leadership team, and then also the bigger membership overall, to be like, oh, okay, like y'all care a lot about professional development opportunities. So like, let's host a workshop about REUs, so research experience for undergrads. So like, how do you find them? What even is it? Because a lot of people don't know. How do you find them? How do you apply for them? Having students who've done them come back and talk and be like, okay, this is what helped me. This is what I wish I would have known. This was my experience, and things like that. So you have to try to kind of stay on top of what the thing is, because you can plan a ton of events, but if you're not paying attention to what the people care about, then they're not going to buy in. They're not going to show up. And so now you spent time and resources, and you planned an event and nobody came to. So you got to kind of make sure you're paying attention to what the students care about and what they're going to find meaningful and what they want to give their time to. But also, trying to, as an advisor, like guide them. And they'll like, well, we want to do this. And I'm like, okay, that's great. like let's talk about some logistics, like how do you think you're going to do this, and like, you know, the planning, the timeline, the budget, and stuff like that. And so sometimes they're like, oh, okay, like maybe this was a little different than I thought it was, or the event's going to look different than what we initially planned, or like we're going to need more time to do this, so maybe this is something that we'll like table, especially if something comes up in the spring semester. Like we're going to put a pin in this and we'll come back to it next year because we don't have time to make it into the event that they want to see that particular year. But also it's about balance too, because with ACS, they're looking, when they do the reviews and assign the awards, there's a service aspect, there's a professional development aspect, chapter development, and then also finances. And so it's kind of being aware of all of those things, and you might be stronger in one area, but you can't neglect something to be stronger. You've got to be well-rounded to make it up to that outstanding level.
No, I think you guys do an amazing job. The events are always great, the ones that I can make, you know. So I think it's one of the best run ACS clubs that I've seen.
Thank you.
So I think you guys do an amazing job, and how you're working with the students and, you know, making sure that their input is always first and foremost part of the process. I think that's an amazing thing. And so you talk about advising, so I think we can get into, you know, last thing we'll hit, you know, your faculty advisor awards here. So you're a great advisor.
Oh,
I've heard it
thank
from
you.
a lot of students. Students that don't even have you as an advisor go to you for advising.
That is true, yes.
So, you know, as an advisor, and you interact with so many students year to year, new students every year. What are some of the pitfalls that students fall into, and what is some of the advice that you would give students coming in if, you know, they maybe never had another family member that has gone to college? What's some advice you would give them?
So again, kind of going back to something that we talked about earlier, is like, you're not in it alone. Like, you are in this new experience, environment, or whatever. You don't have to have all the information. And I mean, even I've been advising for a while now. So I think, 7 years I've been an advisor. And I got into this because I wanted to help students. I wanted to be able to help shape their experiences and stuff. But I mean, with that said, there are some great advisors, and then there are some advisors that are like not so good. And maybe it's not even that they're not a good advisor. Maybe they're not the best advisor for you. Maybe like personality wise or like vibes wise, something's off. And so part of it is realizing that you've got a lot of options and you can go other places. And so, you know, sometimes, like you mentioned, I will have students that are not assigned to me, or I have students that are not even chemistry majors will come to me and they'll ask me for help. And so it's being willing to ask for help. And that shows up in terms of advising, but that also shows up in terms of in the classroom, because sometimes if you don't let somebody know that you need help or that you're struggling or whatever, they don't know. And if they don't know, they can't help you. And so if you are willing to kind of put yourself out there a little bit and show up to a professor, because even if you feel like you can't ask your advisor something, or you don't know who your advisor is or whatever, if you'll go to a professor, or if you'll go to like an administrative associate in an office or something. So like, you can show up in the chemistry department office and be like, I don't even know. And they will point you towards somebody. And so it's, you know, you have to be willing to kind of put yourself out there and ask the question, ask for help, or be like, I don't know what's going on. And, you know, and I never say I have all the answers, because I don't. But sometimes I'm like, if I don't know, I'll find out who does, or I'll at least find out a person that's going to get us closer to the person who needs it. And so just recognizing that, like, you're here in college as a student to learn, but part of that is like learning how to navigate the system, and, you know, like, you know, your advisor and stuff like that. And it's okay. Like, maybe you have a great advisor. I hope you do. And if you don't, that's also okay, because there's some other ones, and they don't have to officially be your advisor to help you. And so that's one of the things that we tell the students. We're like, it doesn't actually matter if I'm your advisor, or Dr. Moldenhauer, or Dr. Krause. You can come and ask any of us anything. Like, sometimes it's like, oh, I just walked by and your office door is open. Hey, you know. And so you just have to, don't ever be afraid to ask for something that you need that's going to help you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for a lot of students, since like coming from high school and coming from like public institutions and things, or just, just school in general, the way it's done in the US, a lot of students don't feel like they have to take the responsibility for their education, right? It's kind of all written out, it's roadmap for them. But when you get into college, it's really about you taking responsibility for your education. If you don't want to learn, you won't learn.
No. If
you don't want to put in the work, you don't have to. And so it's about, taking that responsibility and taking it as far as you want to go.
Yeah.
And that means, asking questions, talking to your fellow students, talking to people that can help you, advisors, other faculty, just taking that responsibility for your success.
Yeah.
It's no one's going to drag you along
No.
to make you successful. It's about you being responsible for that success. And a lot of students aren't used to that, or just haven't experienced that yet. And that's part of life. It's about being responsible for yourself and your own success.
Well, also college is, for many people, the first place where they can actually fail. Like, they can actually fail at something, because like you said, we cannot drag you to it. So, if you were in college, this is voluntary education at this point. And there is a financial exchange here. So whether you're paying it out of your pocket, you have parents or family who's paying it, whether you have grants and scholarships or you have student loans, there is a financial exchange. And so if you recognize that, like, hey, I want to get my value out of this money, like, you're going to have a much better experience and a lot more success out of it. But inevitably, there are always some people who maybe college one is not for them, and that's fine. Like, there's a lot of great careers that you can have that don't involve a college education, like, but maybe it's not the right time for them or whatever. And so it always kills me, but there are some times that, I have students that just don't come to class. And I mean, at this point, like, I will do what the university asks and what I feel is right to, like, let you know, like, hey, I'm aware that you're not coming to class, and alert you, like, you've missed this many class days or you've missed this many quizzes. It'll ping your advisor, like it pings, like your resident assistant if you're living in university housing and stuff, so that way they can kind of intervene. But at a certain point, like, if you are not coming to class, I'm not going to show up at your residence and be like, hey, get in the car, let's go. You're going to be late. And so there's a lot of people who kind of towards the end of the semester that have not put in the effort are kind of like, oh my gosh, like, what do you mean I'm not going to pass this class? And it's like, you have not done the work. Like, and so they feel those very real consequences for the same time. But so realizing that, like, it is the effort that you put into it that is going to give an experience back out of it. And so if you show up and you just think that, like, you're going to coast and things are going to be okay, you're probably going to have a bad time. And, but if you show up and you're like, hey, I'm struggling, that's okay, because you're not alone in that. But if you're like, I'm going to class, but I don't understand what they're talking about, there's tutoring, there's, study halls, there's all of these resources, but you just got to, be willing to, like, reach out and leverage those.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, I was always told, education was my first job. And so that's how I took, going to college and things like that. And that's what was instilled in me. And so, it's just like, treat it like a job.
Yeah.
Like, treat it like, you're paying to be there.
You are.
It's like, you might be getting scholarship, but somebody is paying that money, and someone thought it was worth it to give you that money to help you succeed. So take advantage of it. Take advantage of this time, because, you might, yes, college is fun. You can have a lot of fun in college, but if you fail out of college, that fun stops.
That fun stops.
So,
exactly.
If anything, just, if you want the good times rolling, because in a lot of ways, college and undergraduate is probably some of the best times of your lives. And you may not, that may sound like that sucks, but it's just, you'll never have your friends around you like this ever again. You'll never have just the freedom and time. Oh, the time is just, is amazing.
Yeah, I tell people all the time, because there's some students who come in and they're like, I want to graduate as soon as possible. And I'm like, if that's what you want to do, like, we can make that happen. I was like, but also recognize that, like, this is the best time of your life. Like, you have enough independence and responsibility and things like that to be able to kind of like function at this like adult level, but you're not what I call like super adulting yet. Like you're not having to pay a mortgage and, you know, all of this stuff. Like you're paying rent and you've got bills and stuff like that for the most part. But it's like you said, you're never going to be around your friends in the same way. You're never going to be able to just be like, oh, it's like a random Thursday night. Let's do this thing on a whim because maybe I don't have class on Friday or I don't have to go in. And also, you know, the breaks, like you're never going to have like a winter break again or a summer break because even as faculty now, you know, like people are like, oh, you have summer break and I'm like, well, I mean, yeah, but like we're still working. We still have things that we have to do. So I'm like, this is a wonderful time of your life, and once it ends, whether you be that you have made it to graduation and you have completed it, or you kind of screw up and you get kicked out of college or whatever, once it ends, you never get it back in the same way. Because even if you come back to college after the fact, usually there's like more responsibilities on you. You're more of an adulty adult, and you know, you don't like... It's not the same as like that first run out into college. And with that said, it's not like that for everybody. Some people are having to high-level adult while they're in college. But I think for the most students, at least, that are here at Tennessee Tech, it's this nice phase of life where you kind of have a lot of freedom and, you know, and responsibility, but you know, you got to take it seriously.
Yeah. And it's your time to explore. It's your time to learn new things, experience new things, try, you know, just all kinds of, like, you get to experience life for what life is in college.
And you figure out who you are.
Yeah.
I mean, when I look at when I started college versus when I finished college, I was not even the same person. Like, I used to be, like, more quiet and insecure and stuff like that, but like doing that practicum and stuff like that, it gave me confidence, and you know, it helped me feel more self-assured, and it also helped me figure out like what I wanted to do in life. And so that time in college is like a lot of growth, and also just in terms of the science behind it, it's a lot of brain development in terms of like you finalizing yourself of like who you are and, you know, making good decisions and stuff like that. So
yeah, and you can make mistakes. There's like
you will make mistakes.
Yeah, you will make mistakes.
Just hopefully they're not, you know,
life altering.
Life altering mistakes. But yeah, realize that like mistakes are part of it. It's I mean, it's part of life, period. But yeah, it's part of college. And if you get into it and you change, like you're like, I want to change my major. That's fine. It's okay. Most people change their major. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, and we're not saying you gotta like, you know, get A's and everything. Go, you know, like you can, like I've missed classes, you know, because of things. It's, you know, there is a lot of wiggle room, and you can still be successful. But it's, again, it's just about, you know, taking responsibility of how you need to be successful. Yeah. And I think
also sometimes, like you said, you know, you've missed classes. Sometimes so first off, make sure you read the syllabus, because some places have attendance policies. And if you miss more than so many classes, you're not going to fail regardless of, I mean, you're not going to pass regardless of what your grade is. But also, like, sometimes there's a class that like you can miss once or twice and it's not going to be a big deal. And then there are some classes that you do not want to miss. You know, I remember, like, I don't know, when I was my first year or two in college, like I would have one class a semester that I would like let myself miss like once or twice. And you know, it's usually like a history class or something that like I can read and catch up and it's not that big of a deal. But then once I started getting into my chemistry classes, you miss a day of a chemistry class and that's rough. When I was at Austin P, I missed a day of inorganic chemistry because I went to the ACS conference. And I came back and I'm like, I don't even think this is the same class. Like, what are you even talking about at this point? And so, you know, even making decisions like that, like I can maybe miss this one day because I need a mental health day, or I just need a personal day. I've had something go on or whatever. That's fine. Maybe they record the lecture and you can catch up, but also maybe that's a class that you be like, okay, no, I will have a personal day after this or something.
Yeah. And I think, you know, some classes you can afford to miss, some classes you can't.
Yeah.
That's definitely a real thing. And, you know, you got to weigh the pros and cons. That's like everything in life. And, you know, that I'm sure that ACS conference experience was worth.
It was
missing that
absolutely
class.
worth missing that day. But, you know, I had to come back and I had to work hard to make up, because it might have been, I think, probably like a 50-minute class, but, you know, it probably took me 2 or 3 hours to go back and get caught up on what was happening. So,
Yeah.
and you never know if it is going to be a class day where it's like, oh my gosh, this is when everything comes together. And I don't know. So again, you've got to just take some personal responsibility for that, and, you know, kind of look and make a good decision, but also be willing to face the consequences after the fact.
Yep, definitely you're easing your way into adulthood and figuring
yeah.
it all out in college for sure. Well, thank you for coming on. I think that was a great conversation. A lot of good advice. If you're still listening, if there's someone you would like me to interview at the University of Tennessee Tech, please reach out to me. I'll try my best to get them on and interview. And if you have questions, don't be afraid to, you know, send me questions for people. So, you know, if I want this podcast to be the people's podcast in a lot of ways, and you can influence it in any way you see fit. So thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.